Hi, I'm firearms attorney Gilbert Ambler, and I'm back today to talk about a subject that I really care a lot about, and hopefully you care a lot about as well, and that is safety in our schools. And I will tell you, I care about this for two reasons. The first reason is that unfortunately, far too frequently, we turn on the news and we see something terrible has happened in a school. And the second reason I care about this is that I have young children. And these children are starting to come to the age where we're starting to think about schools. My wife and I have been looking at schools. And recently we toured a private school. And although I hate that I have to ask these questions, I started inquiring about what security measures they had. And because it is a valid concern. And the school informed me that they were concerned about security. They had some security officers, some people that essentially performed a security function. And I asked whether they were armed, and they explained to me that unfortunately, in their opinion, or based on what they had been told, under Virginia law, they weren't able to be armed while working for the school in Virginia. And I pointed out to them that I think there are some ways that we can actually have them under both federal and Virginia law be armed. The school's very interested. They were receptive. They asked me to send them an email write-up, which of course I did. But it got me thinking, this is information. If this one school that my wife and I went and visited has this problem where they would like their students to be safe and secure, they would like to have somebody armed to make sure they're safe and secure, but they don't believe they're allowed to, how many other schools throughout the Commonwealth have this same issue? And that's why I'm making this video. And I always in my videos have a plea that if you enjoy the content, we want you to subscribe and like and share. But this is really important. If you know people who have young children going to school, especially child daycare centers or private or religious schools in the Commonwealth of Virginia, please share this video so that others can see this and inform schools of what rights they have and what they can do when it comes to making sure students are safe. And I will start at the outset with something that is broadly applicable to every school, and something that is a legislative priority right now in 2025, something that is being worked on in Virginia, which is to get, and this is not really firearms related, it is to get trauma medical supplies into schools. Because most schools have defibrillators, and yet most schools don't have chest seals and tourniquets. And these types of tactical medical supplies, along with the know-how on how to use them, the training that goes along with it, are critical life-saving devices, and having access to them will, if they are provided in schools, will eventually save lives in Virginia. And so that is something that every school should be thinking about. Do they have supplies, and will they train teachers on how to use those supplies? And it's useful not just in the event of a violent attack. It's useful if somebody falls off a merry-go-round and breaks a leg. A tourniquet might save a life. And so schools should be making sure that they have those important lives. And they're relatively affordable. They're probably cheaper than the defibrillator. The second thing, now we're talking and starting to merge into not just medical supplies, but how could a school be defensive? What defensive arms could they have? And even without firearms, air guns would be eligible to be carried on Virginia school property. Virginia law is very specific. It defines a firearm. It talks about weapons on school property, defines the types of weapons. It focuses heavily on firearms. Firearms are defined under Virginia law to include weapons that expel a projectile through an action of an explosive. Because air guns and things like the Byrna that shoot pepper balls use compressed air, they are not firearms, and arguably, I don't believe they are weapons of like kind because of that specific definition. So I believe under current Virginia law, you could carry a Byrna. But what about a school that wants to actually carry firearms? And this is less so for public schools, and it's less so for public schools because they have the resources to go get armed police officers and have armed school resources officers present in schools. And certainly I hope that they do. I hope they take advantage of that. I hope that they get armed school resource officers, and I hope that they train those officers on how to respond to violent attacks. I want to focus on the smaller schools, the schools with less resources, the private schools, the religious schools, the daycare centers, because all of those, it is generally off limits to have firearms on their property. There are, however, exceptions. And to be fair in this video, I must note that depending on your jurisdiction, some jurisdictions out there, especially if you've got an anti-gun prosecutor, are likely to construe the exceptions as defenses, meaning they might still prosecute you, and you would have to point to these as a defense to a judge or jury if you are caught with a weapon, with a firearm specifically, or another weapon defined by 18.2-308.1, which is the Virginia prohibition on weapons on school property. And I should also note at the outset that when it comes to firearms on school property, the Gun-Free School Zones Act, which is a federal law, establishes a 1,000-foot zone where you can't have a loaded firearm around school property, but you're exempted from the federal law if you have a license or permit to carry issued by the state that the school is in. So if we're talking about a Virginia school and you have a Virginia concealed handgun permit, we don't worry about the federal law. We only worry about that 18.2-308.1. First exception that comes to mind doesn't get a weapon inside the school, but it allows somebody to have a loaded handgun inside the vehicular ingress and egress portions of the parking lot or in the parking lot itself while they are inside the vehicle. If they want to leave the vehicle, a firearm can be left in the vehicle provided it is unloaded and secured inside the vehicle. So that automatically gets us firearms on school property. That's a way that we can have them close by and ready to respond. How about firearms in the school? Well, there are a couple of different exceptions. Certain qualified law enforcement officers can have firearms in school. This is where, again, school resource officers, but those small schools don't have those resources. Secondly, for public schools, they can hire a recently retired law enforcement officer that fits a specific code definition who is also DCJS certified and licensed to perform armed security services. For private and religious schools, however, and child daycare centers, they don't need to have a law enforcement tie. In one of the exceptions in 18.2-308.1 is simply for armed, licensed, DCJS certified armed security officers at a private or religious school or a child daycare center. So if you are a parent or if you know parents who have children in a private or religious school and they believe that they're not allowed to have armed security officers, just like a lot of bars in the Commonwealth that hire and nightclubs that hire armed security to work the door, those schools can hire armed security as long as they are certified to go work and keep students safe at those locations. And certainly I think that is a good step. Finally, I'll mention one more exception in 18.2-308.1, which arguably would allow anyone that the school wants. It doesn't have to necessarily be DCJS certified to have a firearm on school property, not for the purposes of security, but of course in an emergency, perhaps it could be used for security. And this is part of a program specifically authorized or facilitated by the school. What is this exception targeted for? It's targeted for something like a school rifle team. However, if the school were to put in place a school rifle team and allow select teachers and select administrators to be coaches on that team, those coaches could have a gun safe in their office and store firearms in that gun safe, and that would fit the legal definition here in 18.2-308.1 and would provide them a way to be armed to defend themselves instead of having to cower and wait for 911 to show up. Because that's what, the legislature wants you to do. The legislature wants you to say, hey, schools are gun-free zones, and by saying that, it means there's never anything bad that's going to happen in a school zone. And it is the legislative equivalent of finding the biggest pile of sand you can find and burying your head in it. And I want to help make sure we get the word out on what people can do in order to arm themselves and prepare themselves. So hopefully we never have to turn on the news and see these atrocities happening in Virginia, at least not to the extent that they have happened elsewhere. If you enjoyed this content, please give us a like and a subscribe, and please share this video with any friends that you have that go to private or religious schools so that we can get this word out there. Thank you.